and actually made him a citizen again of North Carolina and gave him this land here that he resides on. Much of Robbinsville, Milltown, and some of this other part belonged to Junaluska's old home tract. He farmed, Olivia died here, he remarried. When he came back here, his wife and his dog is supposedly buried here with him in this cemetery. He died in, we think 1857. And some young school teacher came here and knew of him. There used to be a girls' academy over here. It's a Methodist academy or a Presbyterian academy. And she knew of this famous chief that was buried here. She contacted the Daughters of the American Revolution in Winston-Salem. And in 1910, November the 10th, they brought this big rock up here and put on his gravesite. They pulled it up here with 8 yoke of oxen. That'd be 8 yoke is probably 16 oxen, I guess. And they pulled this rock up here from where 5 Points is in Robbinsville, where this rock came from. And I was told that this rock that sits here, used to be for people who would ride their horses. They would mount their horses off of this rock down there where it came from. There was a history of that. So they brought this up here in 1910. There was a big day here. The Snowbird folks, Cherokee folks, and local townspeople, county people, Murphy Band. It was a big day here in 1910, and they dedicated this monument to Junaluska. And it went well for a while, and then after a few years, people forgot about it and run down, and then our group took back over. So that's basically the way we got involved and got the tribe to buy this little plot of land, about three acres around it. We convinced them to buy this land that their medicine trail's on, and so it belongs to the tribe now. Junaluska's on his own land now, his tribal land, and we planted the Cherokee flag on it. So he'd be proud of us.
Well, my name is Emmeline Littlejohn Cucumber. I was born October 10th, 1909. Big Charlie, and some calls him Sally, he was my great-grandfather. He was my grandfather's father and my mother's grandfather. And Washington was my mother's father. Called him Big Charlie in the Indian. And the whites, they just called him Sally because it's pretty close to Charlie, the name was. And and I think he was a good council member. When they started talking about the removal, he tried to do his best to hold the land back for the Indians to live on. They said something about moving them out west. And so the people from Washington said that the Indians must go. So Big Charlie started doing some things, and I don't know what he done, but they claim he shot a soldier. They let him go, I think, for the one killing that he done, and he wanted to keep up with his family. He took them with him when they were having a little conference about the removal. So that's the way I've heard. And so Big Charlie says, I think I better go to the mountains with my little boy, because I have a feeling that my little boy will stay back. He says, I'm going to take him to the mountains, and we'll be talking to the mountains, and let this boy hear my prayer. It was his prayer, I guess. And he said he talked to the mountains, and it seemed like the mountains talked back to him. He says, well, you people are real people living in this land here, and it's all yours, all to the Indians. And Big Charlie says, well, I know the man upstairs hears me, hears my prayer. He says, he told the mountains, whatever they had growing up in the mountains, that let the Indians have it to live on. And there was some things that the Indians loved to go get, and that was blueberries, blackberries, and wild salad. They call it jellicoe. That was their wild food. Well, the men folks had deers, bears, and maybe squirrel and rabbits to kill for their family's food. One of the men says, I'm sorry I killed you, dear, but my family needs food, and my family needs something to keep them warm with your hide. So the deer just had to lay there and die. I think that was an awful thing for a man to kill a deer, but he had to die for the food that the family needed was supplied.
And, Solly, they were mistreating his family. You know, they were cruel as they came in, and they were just going through his house and doing things that shouldn't even be mentioned, but we have to mention these things. And Solly then, in turn, he killed two of those soldiers later on as time went along. It just got too much for him, as they had harassed his wife and harassed his sons. And so when he killed those, he had to flee. And of course his sons fled with him, but there was an old man behind trying to keep up with him. And his name was Dihtinuski. And he was crippled and old, but he wanted to go with them. And I never did know whatever happened to that man. He probably went so far and maybe just died, you know, as they fled toward the great into the Great Smokies up around Clayman's Dome area. And I always thought of after these things had taken place, of how they lived, what did they eat, maybe fish, maybe birds, maybe whatever they get, you know, to eat, to survive on. And then at night, when they lie down, like we have a good, nice, soft bed to lie on, and what did they lie on? Maybe a hard surface, maybe on a big rock or whatever, to rest. And they didn't have the bed covers, you know, all those things. And I always wonder how in the world did they survive at that time, you know, all during that period.
Well, while the people they went to sleep, they was so tired. There was two girls a little ways off from Charlie, and they weren't sleepy. The others went to sleep, and Charlie went to sleep. And Big Charlie had tomahawks on the side of his hips, two of them each side. And these girls talked and whispered and said, why don't we go get them tomahawks and do something about these soldiers? So one of them got up and went and got them and began to hit the men in the head until they cracked them and killed them. And when they got through doing that, well, they took the Tommyhawks back and put them into Big Charlie's hip pockets. Now, they might have been little hoops made for his Tommyhawks, not pocket. But anyway, Charlie woke up when the girl, I think one of the girls' name was Sonawagi. And he woke up and she was putting the Tommyhawks into his pocket. And he asked her what they'd been doing. And she said, "Come and see." And he got up and he said, "What you do that for? What are we going to do?" And she said, "Well, I don't know why we done this." And Charlie says, "Well, don't tell anybody you done it. Just, I'll take the blame for you." So he took the blame, and the girls went free. And they walked on, and they got scattered, and Charlie and his two sons, I think, and brothers, went on up to Cleveland's Dome to hide. They knew there was a cave up there. And they stayed up there, I think, about a week or two, till somebody had noticed there were people hiding up there and told the people down below that, and there's a man named Preacher Arneach, and they got together and talked about it, and they said, "Who's going to volunteer to go up there and ask Big Charlie and tell him that something has to be done?" They looked at Preacher Arneach, and he says, "Well, I'll volunteer." So he went up there and told him that Charlie had to surrender. And the brothers and whoever was all with him said, "We'll go with you when you get your punishment." So they went with him when the Arneach got him to come off the mountain. And they went down to the place that they called Gidui, I think. And down there people were waiting. And they got him lined up. And Preacher Arneach had to do the shooting. And he didn't want to, but he loved the people that was going to stay and let Charlie pay for their homeland.
And didn't stand a trial, didn't have a hearing or anything. But the only thing he said when he's getting ready to die, I understand, he said, "I'm giving my life for my people." And he said, "You people that I'm giving my life for," he said, "take care of this land." You know, and then he was executed.
When they asked him for what he wanted done, he says, "Well, if I have to die like this," he says, "I'd like for the Indians to come back down and make a new start, have them to take their choice of the hillside, level place, lowland, and good water place for them to have good water." And he says, "I'd like for them to enjoy while I'm taking my punishment."
I know Story's always been out there that it was Swachach and I don't know how many other, but that done the foreign squad when they first assassinated him. I mean, not assassinated him, but when they gave his life up so Cherokees could stay in North Carolina. That's the only story I always knew, you know. And it weren't like they wanted to. I think he made a ultimate sacrifice in order for his Cherokee to stay.
So that's all I could tell. He said that he's going to pay for everything. so the Indians can live and enjoy what few days they have.
Charlie is an interesting character by the history or the legend either way. There are stories in Cherokee among certain groups with the drama that believe that version of the story and is really a great hero to the Eastern Band. But in this part of the reservation, it's not really that case. Zolly's not. Some people really despise even hearing the name. Charlie, according to the legend, of course, the soldiers were being hostile to his family, and a baby died, and basically he reacted out of self-defense. And on toward the end, they had Uchela or Uchella, you hear it pronounced and spelled all different ways, spoke to Charlie and convinced him to come in, and that in doing so, everybody that was hiding in the mountains would be able to remain. And that's really not the case. The oral history in Snowbird basically says that Charlie didn't do anything but hurt the Cherokees' cause by doing what he did. The deposition of Charlie's wife after she was removed out to Oklahoma goes that Charlie basically got mad that the soldiers had captured him. He had his wife, his children, his grandchildren. There were 16 of them, and there were 3 soldiers. And he got really upset and started browbeating his sons about why are we letting 3 men take all of us. You know, there's 4 of us grown men, and we're letting 3 white men with guns take us. Bear in mind, Charlie was talking in the Cherokee language. These soldiers were coming in from Tennessee. They didn't know what was being said. And he basically browbeat his sons into attacking. And basically he said, I'm going to kill these men, and there's nothing you can do to stop me. So you can either help me or get out of my way. And they attacked the soldiers. The privates Perry and Martin were killed as a result of it. And they fled off into the Nantahala Mountains. The story goes, the legend goes, that Will Thomas saw this as an opportunity for the people in Cherokee to remain unmolested. And I'll go to that here in just a second. And used the Charlie incident, the murders, to allow the Cherokees to remain by having the Cherokees assist in capturing Charlie and his family, and that in doing so would be allowed to remain. And he employed the aid of a man named Uchella that was a chief, and he actually lived in the same vicinity in Nantahala as Charlie did. He knew Charlie well. They were practically neighbors. And the legend says that Charlie went and talked to Zolly. Well, that didn't happen. What happened was that, Will Thomas went and talked to Uchella and said, we need your help. There was not a written agreement for any of the Cherokees assisting in this to remain until after the fact. They willingly went after Charlie,